Jacques crouched low under the hot sky and brushed ash from his goggles. He felt the heat press on his back as he edged forward through the wrecked metal piles. Each step kicked up a small cloud of red dust that burned in his lungs. The world around him was silent except for the distant hiss of leaking pipes and the soft crack of broken circuits underfoot. He glanced at Mara beside him. Her face was tight with focus as she scanned the ground with a handheld device. They had one chance to find the right piece before the drones arrived. And they both knew it. Time was already running out. The junkyard looked like a skeleton of a lost civilization. Every machine lay in pieces as if a giant had torn them apart in anger. Rusty plates of steel curved into twisted shapes, and old fuel tanks lay split open like broken eggshells. Sparks still glowed faintly from a cracked reactor core in the center pit. Jacques checked his watch and saw there were only minutes left. He and Mara followed the map they had found in an abandoned station. It led them here for one reason, a single scrap of metal said to hold the secret of a lost starship. Rumors whispered it could change any battle, but also that it could destroy more than it would save. Above them, the sky began to hum. A swarm of enemy drones swept through the air with red lights that stared down like angry eyes. Jacques tightened his grip on his laser cutter as a chill ran through him. The drones searched for scavengers who dared to take anything from this world. If they found Jacques and Mara, they would open fire without warning. Mara's device beeped faster. Now it pointed toward a pile of scrap that shone with a faint blue glow. Jacques nodded and led the way. Each step felt heavier as he thought of what awaited them if they failed. They reached a cluster of bent beams that formed a crude shelter. Dust and wires hung from the frame like cobwebs. Jacques ducked under a beam and crawled across the metal floor. His heart pounded in his chest with every scrape of metal. Mara shone her torch into the dark space and found the object, a chunk of metal that pulsed with light. It lay on a broken control panel. Its edges were smooth and cold, and it hummed like a living thing. Jacques reached out and felt a tingle run through his fingers. He looked up at Mara and saw her nails dig into her palm from excitement and fear. Worked quickly, Jacques held a small cutting torch to free the scrap from the panel. Sparks flew and danced around them like fireflies. The metal beneath the glow splintered under the heat. Mara used a crowbar to pry the piece free. It came loose with a final pop. As if something inside had sighed in relief, Jacques grabbed it and held it close. The glow brightened and the hum grew deeper. He felt it pull at his mind, whispering secrets he could not understand. For a moment he feared it would burn his hand, but instead it warmed him with a soft pulse. Behind them, the first drone fired a warning shot that sparked against a pile of scrap. They froze and waited. As the beam cut through the silence, Jacques' jaw clenched. They had only seconds before the drones attacked in force. Mara tucked the glowing scrap into her pack and slid her hand to brush dirt off its smooth surface. Jacques stood and drew his blaster. He eased Mara forward through a narrow path between two steel girders. Pieces of metal shifted and groaned as they moved. A bright flash pulsed from the scrap. It lit up the rusted walls around them. Mara blinked and clutched Jacques' arm. The light painted long shadows that flickered like ghosts. Jacques felt his breath catch. He saw a symbol carved into the surface of the metal, a circle with 3 lines that curved like wings. The mark felt ancient, full of power. He whispered, "Mara, I think this is more than a weapon." She nodded, her eyes wide. "It is," she said softly. "I can feel it." They pushed on. The sound of drones growing louder above the scrap hill. Jacques led them to a low opening in a nearby wall that promised safety. As they ducked through the gap, the ground shook with a distant blast. Sparks fell like rain from the sky. They stumbled into a dark corridor, and the world went quiet again. Jacques switched off his torch and pressed his back to the cold stone. He could still feel the hum of the scrap against his chest. Through the darkness he heard his own heart beating. Mara shifted the pack and the glow from inside lit her face in soft blue waves. She slid a hand into her pocket and held out a small data chip. "This has the rest of the map," she whispered. Jax pressed it into her other hand. He took a steady breath and let it out slowly. They had the scrap. They had the map. But the sky above had gone black at the same moment. The piece began to glow. And for a heartbeat they feared the worst. Jax gripped Mara's shoulder and said, "We made it this far. We won't stop now." The hum of the metal grew louder. And the dark corridor seemed to stretch ahead like an empty promise. But Jax knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same after they built what they were meant to build from this last scrap. After days of careful work in their hidden workshop, the team gathered around a low table lit by flickering lamps. Mara placed the glowing scrap at the center, its soft light painting strange shadows on the walls. Jax unrolled a dusty holosheet beside it. The ancient map they found was drawn in strange symbols and twisting lines that led them here for a reason. But now the real mystery began. The room was thick with anticipation as Lark, the engineer, leaned closer to study the scrap's face. Her fingers traced the etched circle and the winged lines beneath it. She frowned and tapped the metal lightly. "These marks are part of a bigger design," she said softly. Harlan, their former pirate, circled the table and peered at the holosheet. "If we read this right, the blueprint completes here," he said, pointing at a spot just beside the scrap symbol. "But we need more than half the code to build this ship, and the rest is scattered across the galaxy in hidden vaults." Silence fell as the weight of Harlan's words sank in. The crew had risked everything to capture the scrap, only to learn that bigger challenges lay ahead. Jax clenched his fists. "We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we can't back down now," he said. His voice was steady, but inside he felt a tremor of doubt. Mara tucked her device into her belt and nodded. "I have the second half of the map on this chip from the last station," she said. "It shows the vault locations, but they're deep inside enemy territory." Lark shook her head. "The alien language here is tricky," she said, pointing to a line of tiny glyphs that ran along the edge of the map. "These symbols change meaning with every shift in the frame. We need to decode them precisely, or we'll end up building a weapon we cannot control. The scraps could react unpredictably to our commands." Mara slid the data chip across the table, and Jax inserted it into a reader. The holomap flickered and expanded, revealing 3 glowing nodes. Each node pulsed in sync with the scrap's hum. They represented vaults where the missing blueprint pieces were hidden. Harlan traced a finger to the first node. "This one's in the Corthan system, inside a wrecked cruiser turned salvage yard, heavily guarded by mercenaries. The second is on an uncharted moon, controlled by a cult that worships this design. And the last is inside the ruins of an old alien research base, beyond the dead zone." A low murmur went around the table. The task seemed impossible. Mara raised her head and said, "We faced worse. We saved this scrap under fire. We can do this too, but we must move fast. The longer we wait, the more likely our enemies will get to these vaults first." Lark tapped her foot. "I'll finish decoding the symbols tonight, but I need quiet and time," she said. "The alien code isn't like ours. It responds to sound and thought. If we rush, we might trigger a lock or destroy the data altogether. We must be precise." Harlan's lips curved into a grin. "Precision is my specialty when I sneak past guards," he said. "Leave the infiltration to me. I'll get our crews inside the vaults without them noticing." The others smiled, finding hope. In his confidence, Jax drew a deep breath. Then it settled. "We split into teams and strike all 3 vaults at once. We have 15 hours until the enemy fleet arrives in orbit. We either bring back the pieces tonight or lose everything. Keep the scrap safe here until we return. Don't let it out of sight. The core of this ship depends on it." Night fell outside, and the workshop lights glowed like embers in the dark. Lark closed her eyes and laid her hands on the scrap. She whispered alien words she had memorized, and the map's lines on the wall shifted, pulsing with hidden circuits. Mara watched in awe as new paths glowed through the stone beneath her feet. Jax and Harlan prepared gear, fastening crates of weapons and tools to their backs. Each checked their sidearms and blasters in silence. In that moment, they were not just scavengers or outcasts, but guardians of a power older than their world. As the teams parted and vanished into the shadows, the scrap at the table continued its gentle. Its light dimmed and brightened like a heartbeat pacing itself. The blueprint's promise hung in the air, a promise of power, creation, and danger. Deep in the workshop, Mara stayed behind with Lark, and together they watched the holomap, waiting for the crack of the first vault to open. The night echoed. With their silent vow, they would reassemble the hidden blueprint and build the warship that would change the galaxy forever. News of the alien blueprint traveled fast through the dusty tunnels and hidden warrens beneath the city. Outcasts, rebels, and outlaws all heard the call of its power, each wondering if the lost starship could bring hope or danger to their world. Jack stood in the center of the main workshop as the first volunteer arrived, a tall woman named Yana, whose arms were covered in scar tattoos. She carried a heavy crate of tools, and her eyes shone with determination. "I heard you found something that can turn the tide," she said. "I want in." Mara stepped forward and took the crate. "We need every hand," she replied, her voice steady despite the thrill in her heart. Over the next hour, more figures slipped through the narrow door. A quiet AI specialist called. Torin, who wore old circuit boards around his neck like jewelry. A weathered mechanic named Suri, who could make metal sing under her touch. And a calm pilot known as Vega, whose ship had outrun pirates and patrols more times than anyone could count. Each newcomer brought stories of near misses and twists of fate on the edge of space. They spoke in low voices about old battles and lost homes. But all of them believed in the promise of the blueprint. Jax moved among them and handed out simple weapons and gear. "We build hope from scrap and code," he said. "But we must trust each other." His eyes met each pair, looking for the spark of loyalty. Yana tightened her gloves and nodded. "I've fought for my family before, and I'll fight for this cause now." Torin lifted a small datapad and said softly, "I can link the alien core to our systems, but the code is alive. It learns as we touch it. We must be careful, or it will twist our machines into something we cannot control." Suri slammed a wrench on the table and said, "Let it learn. We learn with it. We build it safe, or we die trying." Vega leaned back and crossed her arms. "I'll pilot anything you brew in this workshop, but I need clear orders and a place to stand when the fire starts." Silence filled the room as the weight of their mission settled on every heart. Jax raised his hand and said, "Tomorrow at dawn, we all head to the Corthan wreck. We split into 2 teams, one to secure the first vault and one to guard the scrap. Stay sharp, watch each other's backs." A murmur of agreement swept the group. And Vega stepped forward, her voice strong. "We also need a code of conduct. No stealing from each other, no leaving anyone behind. We win together or fail together." Torin tapped his datapad and added, "We will monitor the core's pulses, and if its code shifts too fast, we halt work and reevaluate." Mara pointed to a rough table where schematics were pinned with scrap bolts. "Here are your roles," she said. "Yana and Suri, you take the front path through the salvage fields. Your strength and skill will clear debris and guard the perimeter. Vega and Torin, you take the rear wagon and provide air support. I remain here with Jax to secure the scrap until you return. Any questions?" No one spoke. The group nodded, their faces set like stone, ready for what lay beyond the safe walls. Night fell and torches flickered as they broke into smaller clusters. Yana shared tales of her run-in with the Corthan mercenaries. Suri showed old scars from bowcasters and plasma shots. Torin explained his plan to use machine learning to map vault locks, and Vega traced orbital paths in the dust. Jax and Mara listened and offered advice, forging bonds that would carry them through fire. Before dawn, each team gathered at the workshop gate. Jax looked at them and felt pride and fear together. "Remember, what we build is more than a ship. It is our promise to every soul who still believes in a future. Watch the sky and trust your instincts." The air was cold and still as they set out. the glowing scrap resting on a platform behind them like a sleeping dragon. The city's lights faded behind the workshop, and the sandstorms of the Badlands rose ahead, casting long shadows like watchful eyes as the wagons rolled forward. Torin whispered to Vega, "Do you think we are ready?" Vega smiled and nodded. "We have each other. That is the only thing that matters in this fight." In the front, Yana and Suri tightened their straps and raised their weapons, their breaths misting in the chill morning air. Jax and Mara watched them go, their hearts beating in rhythm with the hum of the scrap. They knew the vault was guarded by more than machines. It was protected by fear and betrayal, but they had forged their crew from the lost and the brave. Under the rising sun, the convoy crossed the ruined plains, every mile bringing them closer to the vault and the unknown. Back at the workshop, empty benches stood silent, waiting for the first cheers or the first cries of warning. For Jax, Mara, and the glowing core, this was the moment their hope would be tested, and the unity they had built would decide the fate of the galaxy. In the heart of the hidden workshop, the crew gathered around the alien scrap, its pale glow pulsing against the steel girders above them. Flames from the forge danced like fire spirits as Jax and Lark prepared the first hollow plates for the hull. Welding rigs hissed softly, and sparks flew like falling stars. Each plate was shaped by hand on a drift bench, hammered and bent until it matched the curved lines from the blueprint. The air tasted of hot metal and promise, yet beneath the noise, a soft hum rose from the scrap, as if it whispered encouragement and warning all at once. Lark placed the core plate on the supports and handed Jax his welding torch. His hands shook slightly as he ignited the flame. The steel around them glowed orange with heat, and the workshop grew darker as shadows retreated. Mara watched closely, marking precise alignments on her holoscreen. "Keep the torch steady," she called, her voice steady against the roar of metal. Jax exhaled and guided the weld along the seam. The molten metal flowed and hardened in minutes, bonding the alien plate to the steel framework. As the hull took shape, a strange vibration ran through the floor. Torin paused his calibration work and frowned. "The scrap is resonating with the welds," he said quietly. "It's like it senses each join." Suri peered at the glowing joints and tapped them with a hammer. Each tap rang with a clear tone that echoed through the workshop. "It's singing," she said in awe. "The hull is alive." Harlan rose from his station and crossed to the hull. "Alive or not, we need to finish this fast. Enemy ships will arrive soon," he reminded them. Night deepened outside as more plates snapped into place. The crew worked in shifts under dim lamps, their faces lit by orange glows and blue pulses from the core. Lark hummed a quiet tune to stay calm while she welded. Jax replaced his gloves twice, but his grip never faltered. Every plate joined felt like a heartbeat added to a greater whole. Yet with each arc of the torch, the vibrations grew stronger and the hum deepened. At one point, the hull shivered and let out a high-pitched tone. Everyone froze and looked at the scrap. Tiny cracks appeared in the weld lines, glowing red-hot for a moment before cooling. Mara tapped her datapad and frowned. "The code in the scrap is rewriting itself," she said. "These welds are rewriting the blueprint." Jax stepped back and observed the glowing seams. "Then we must guide it," he said, "or it will build something we cannot control." They adjusted their strategy. Lark switched her torch settings to a finer beam. Torin rerouted power to stabilize the core's output, and Suri reinforced each joint with secondary plating. Harlan stood watch at the door with his blaster ready. Shadows lurked beyond the workshop walls, and distant thunder of engines echoed through the tunnels. Each member knew that failure could mean the destruction of their world as well as their own. Hours passed and the last curved plate slid into place. The hull loomed like the skeleton of a great beast, empty yet waiting. Jax wiped sweat from his brow and said, "Bring up the power slowly." Torin opened a valve on the reactor line, and the scrap's light flared across the hull's frame. Energy lanced through wires and circuits. Hidden beneath the metal, the seams glowed from within. and the hull trembled as ancient symbols shimmered along the plating. Suddenly, the ground shook as if the planet itself groaned. Sparks flew from one of the seams, and a panel snapped inward, revealing a cavity filled with blue energy. Mara tapped commands and the panel resealed with a hiss. That was a surge. She said, "The scrap is testing us. It will only bind when it knows we are worthy." Jack stroked his chin and nodded. "Then we show it our will, not just our skill." He strode to a control console and raised his voice. "This ship will defend the weak and punish the oppressors," he declared. His words echoed inside the hollow hull, as if amplified by the metal. The scrap pulsed faster, and the seams glowed brighter. The vibration stilled for a heartbeat. And then the hull sang a deep, resonant chord that filled the room. Silence settled as the song faded. The workshop lights flickered back on, and the hum from the scrap eased into a steady beat. The crew stared at the newly formed hull, its surface smooth and radiant with the alien symbols now fused into the metal. Lark rested a gloved hand on the hull and whispered, "It accepted our bond, we made it part of us." Mara smiled and said, "We are ready for the next step, the engine and weapons must follow, but the hull stands firm." Jacques placed a hand on the metal and felt warmth seep into his palm. "We forged this hull from scrap and faith," he said softly. "Now we carry its promise into the stars." Outside, distant sirens screamed the approach of enemy patrols, and the crew braced themselves for the trials ahead. But in that moment, amid sweat and steel, they had shaped hope from fire. And their warship's shell would become legend in the battles to come. The engine chamber lay at the center of the warship skeleton, its walls lined with alien conduits that pulsed faintly with light. Jacques and Torin stood at the main control console, eyes fixed on the glowing scrap that acted as the heart of the engine. Sparks danced along the wires as Harlan and Suri tightened clamps on the power core. The air smelled of ozone and oil, heavy with tension. Torin tapped a sequence on his datapad and spoke quietly. "I'm opening the valve to let energy flow," he said. His fingers flew over the controls, and the scrap's glow brightened, casting blue light on every face. Jacques nodded and cleared his throat. "Steady now." "Everyone brace for feedback," he warned. A low hum rose from the engine chamber, growing louder with each breath. Suddenly, the glow spilled into the room as the scrap fed pulsing energy into the alien reactor. Flames of energy roared along the conduits, and the hull trembled. Suri's hair whipped around her face as she secured the final power relay. The tremor grew stronger, and a warning siren wailed. "Pressure is climbing," Harlan shouted over the alarm. "Core is unstable," Torin's voice shook as he adjusted the stabilizers. Red lights blinked, and the hum turned into a roar. Jacques gripped the edge of the console. "Divert main power to the secondary coils," he ordered calmly. Torin obeyed, rerouting energy streams with swift taps. The hum eased for a moment, and then rose again. The reactor's glow pulsed like a heartbeat, and steam hissed from a vent. A blast of hot air slammed into the crew, and the hull groaned in protest. Suri and Lark moved in to reinforce weak points, welding quick patches over seamed cracks. "Hold the plates, I need more heat," Lark called, her torch carving bright lines across the metal. Outside the hull, Vega watched from the observation deck, her hands tight on the railing. "We're seeing overload spikes," she radioed down. "I don't want to lose this ship before it's born." Jacques' voice came back steady. "We've come too far to fail now. Keep the power link open, and watch those spikes. We'll contain it together." The scrap's glow turned sharper, its hum now a deep growl, without warning. The reactor shuddered, and a blinding flash filled the chamber. The lights failed, and the world went dark, leaving nothing but the deep blue glow of the scrap. Voices shouted in the dark as the crew staggered. Jacques fumbled for his flashlight, flicked it on, his beam cutting through the shadows. Mara's voice crackled in his ear. "Everyone okay?" "Report in." One by one their voices answered, shaky but alive. The emergency lights flickered on and revealed a fine mist of coolant drifting through the air. The hull had held, But the hum now felt haunted. Torin reached the control console and wiped sweat from his brow. The core rerouted itself, he said. It bypassed my safety grid and found its own path. I've never seen code rewrite hardware in real time. Suri laid a hand on his shoulder. It did what we asked. We showed it our. Well, it showed us its power, but we remain in control, right? Torin nodded slowly, eyes wide. Jock stepped forward and placed a hand on the scrap surface. Show me your pulse, he murmured. The core responded with a gentle glow and a quiet beat. The hum was softer but steady, like a calm heart. We matched. It's rhythm, Jock said. It knows we lead, not the other way around. With the core stable again, Torin reignited the secondary coils, and power flowed smoothly into the chamber. Engines sprang to life with a deep growl that shook the floor. Hull vibrated with energy as hidden circuits glowed. Outside, Vega yelled, "Main thrusters active at 20%. And then 50. The workshop rattled as if ready for takeoff. Jock smiled at Lark. You did it. We did it, he said. The engine is ours. Lark's grin was wide as she wiped soot from her brow. It runs on our scrap and our code. It's alive. But it obeys. The crew gathered around the core, exhaustion and triumph in their eyes. Mara checked readings and nodded. All systems green. We have power. Weapon systems next. But we stand strong now. The hum changed tone, rising high and soft. It masked any doubt and promised new chances. Jock looked to the others and said, We have given this warship life from scrap and courage. Tomorrow we face the vaults. Today we celebrate our bond. We will march into battle with engines that roar and hearts that burn. They raised their helmets high and clinked them in salute. The alien reactor pulsed a bright wave across the hull, and deep in the metal core, ancient circuits whispered. The promise was sealed. The warship was born from scrap and flame, and none would ever forget its chant of power unleashed. Dawn broke in pale streaks over the ruined skyline as the crew readied the warship for its first flight. The hull's alien symbols glowed softly in the morning light, casting long shadows across the supply wagons. Jock stood on the boarding ramp and watched as Yana and Suri secured the hull plating. Their eyes shone with excitement and fear. The hangar doors began to rumble open, revealing an open sky marked by distant patrol drones and swirling dust clouds. Torin stood by the engine intake, running final diagnostics, his datapad displayed. Streams of code flowing like living vines. All systems nominal, he reported. Engines at standby. Power core stable. Weapon arrays calibrated at 50%. Vega climbed into the pilot's seat atop the command deck, her fingers dancing over the controls. She glanced at her crew through the viewport. Ready when you are, she said, voice firm. Inside the hull, the hum of the scrap resonated through the floor. Mara placed her hand on the core and whispered, Quietly, guide us true. The scrap's glow pulsed in response. As if acknowledging her plea, Jock stepped forward and put on his helmet. Let's show the galaxy what scrap and courage can do, he said, and the crew nodded in agreement. With a hiss and a roar, the engines ignited. Blue flames flickered along the conduits, and the hull trembled with power. Vega eased the throttle, and with a groan of metal, the warship lifted off the ground. The ground dropped away, and the world below shrank. Dust swirled in circles as they rose above the wreckage outside. The sky roared as they punched through the atmosphere. Suri gripped a railing and felt her stomach lurch, but she smiled. She flies, she whispered. High above the desert plains, the warship soared like a great metal bird with glowing veins. The scrap's light spilled across the control room in soft waves. On the command deck, Jock called out, Steady climb, maintain 30 degrees angle, watch for mines. Vega nodded and adjusted the pitch. Mines detected ahead, pass array 157, she said. And the sensors blinked warnings. A field of drifting space mines lay in their path, relics of old battles forgotten by time. Harlan leaned over a viewport and said, I'll handle these. Lock weapons on manual. Let me test her firepower. Jocks hesitated. One shot each, conserve energy. We show power, not waste it. Harlan grinned and launched a single plasma torpedo. It streaked out of a wingport and detonated a cluster of mines in a flash of light. Shrapnel glinted in the sunlight and hurtled away. The warship dipped and banked to avoid debris. Then Vega cut engines to glide past the rest. "We're clear," she said. "Course set for the Corthan system. ETA 1 hour." The crew exhaled. Tension easing for the first time, Mara tapped her console and said, "Tracking enemy patrols. 2 drones on intercept course. They'll be here in 2 minutes." A red alert flashed. "Evasive maneuvers." Vega ordered, "Roll left, full thrusters." The warship spun in the sky, twisting like a dancer. The chasing drones locked onto their reactor's signature. But as they angled, Vega opened a side hatch, and Harlan fired another plasma torpedo across the sky. The blast forced the drones to veer away. Above the clouds, the warship leveled off and settled into a steady flight. The crew leaned against railings, hearts pounding but faces bright. Jocks looked to the glowing core and murmured, "You see that? You are the reason we fly." The scrap's hum joined the engine's roar, and for a moment they felt unity with the ship. Days of travel lay ahead as they jumped toward the Corthan system. But for now they were aloft, free from the binds of gravity and fear. Vega engaged the jump drive, and the stars stretched into lines of light. Then the world collapsed in a flash, and they emerged between stars and a new system. In the quiet after the jump, Lark checked the hull integrity. "No signs of stress beyond expected levels," she reported. Tears of relief and pride wetted her cheeks. She held together. Suri said softly, "She is ours." Jocks gathered them in the briefing room, a small space behind the command deck. "Tomorrow we storm the first vault," he said. "But for tonight, we remember this moment. We flew on scrap and hope. We are stronger than any patrol." The crew clasped hands, their bond sealed in flight, in the darkness of space. The warship loomed like a glowing sentinel, its first voyage complete. Its hum echoed through every corridor and console. The promise of the blueprint shone clear. They would take back the pieces, build the greatest warship, and protect every soul who believed in them. The maiden voyage had begun their legend, and none who saw them soar would ever doubt their power again. The warship slipped through silence as it emerged above the Andrus sector, its hull glowing faintly with alien runes that pulsed in the ship's rhythm. Jock stood at the command rail beside Mara, his eyes scanning the space ahead, the emptied void felt too calm, and he knew danger waited just beyond sight. Vega's voice crackled over the console. "Captain, sensors show no enemy ships in range," she said quietly. "But there's a strange energy signal from below." Jocks frowned and tapped the display. The signal matched the scrap's core frequency, but darker, twisted by unknown power. Suri joined them at the rail, her brow creased. "That signal could be a trap. I've seen that pattern in old battle data. Enemy mines laced with alien tech. We could fly right into a web." Jocks nodded. "Then we proceed with caution," he said. "Lower the landing gear, but keep shields at full." The warship descended through drifting debris fields and glowing remnants of past battles, its engines humming softly against the vastness. The landing bay on Andrus Prime lay hidden in a crater, half covered by dust and metal wrecks. Harlan guided the ship down with steady precision, dodging shattered hulls that lay like broken bones. They touched down with a soft thud. Dust rose like ghosts around them, and the airlocks hissed open. Steel plates slid aside to reveal the ruined vault entrance beneath the crater floor. Torin tapped commands and the doors opened an inch at a time, revealing a dark corridor lit by flickering blue lights. Jocks led the landing party out onto the cracked ground. Yana and Suri flanked him with weapons raised. Mara held the glowing scrap close, its light slicing through the darkness. The corridor walls were lined with alien glyphs that glowed faintly, guiding them deeper underground. Suddenly, the lights blinked out, and the corridor echoed with a low click. Viga's warning came too late. "Watch your left flank," she shouted. A hidden railgun fired and a wall panel folded open, spewing plasma bolts across the floor. They dove for cover as sparks cooked the ground where they had stood. Suri grabbed a support beam and pulled it free, using it as a shield. "They knew we would come here. They want us pinned down," she said. Her eyes flicked to the shadows beyond the gunport, where figures in dark armor slipped through side corridors. From above, the warship's hull rumbled as enemy fighters swooped in to block Viga's path. "They're hitting us from every angle." Viga radioed, "I can't break through without a clear shot." Jax responded, "Hold them off. I will clear the corridor inside the vault entrance." Mara tapped the scrap against a rune on the wall, and the symbols flared bright white, lighting the hallway with ancient power. "This should open the next door," she said. The wall slid back to reveal a chamber filled with alien machinery. Its center held a polished cube, the second piece of the blueprint. Yana and Harlan cleared the room of hidden mines, their shots precise and calm, while Torin rigged a protective field around the cube. "Hurry, this chamber is linked to the ships." "Sensors," he warned. "If they overload, the vault will seal forever." Jax nodded. "Go," he said. Mara stepped forward and lifted the cube onto a padded plate. Its surface was warm and hummed against her gloves. The moment she moved it, alarms screamed as the corridor doors began to close. The plasma gun reopened to block their path, forcing Yana to sprint and jam her crowbar into the mechanism outside. Viga banked the warship and fired plasma cannons into the roof, destroying blocking ships and sending debris crashing down. Harlan covered the lane, picking off armored enemy troops. Each shot rang loud in the corridor as Jax and Mara hustled the cube through the closing doors. They dashed into the landing. Breathless and battered, Torin caught the cube and slid it into Mara's pack. "Got it," she said, and the scrap pulsed in approval. Jax shouted, "To the bridge!" They raced up the gangway as troops stormed the bay. Viga cut the lockdown sequence and engaged full throttle. The warship shuddered under enemy fire as it rose from the crater. Lasers cut through exhaust vents and engines groaned in protest. The hull shields flared blue and absorbed the blasts. At the command deck, Jax placed the cube beside the scrap. The blue glow spread across both pieces, linking them. A wave of energy pulsed through the consoles, and the warship let out a deep roar, sending enemy fighters tumbling back. Jax exhaled and looked at his crew, their faces streaked with sweat and grime. "We survived the trap," he said. "Now we have 2 pieces, only 1 more to go." Mara smiled and replied, "We'll finish this, just as we planned." As they prepared for the next jump, the ship hummed with renewed purpose, its crew more united and determined than ever before. The third piece of the blueprint glowed softly on the console as Jack stepped onto the bridge. His eyes shone with quiet excitement, but he kept his voice steady. "This is it, the final part," he said. Mara placed the cube next to the other 2, and immediately the scrap in the center pulsed with bright light. The bridge hummed, filled with a warm energy that raised every spirit in the room. Torin tapped commands and the 3 pieces lifted from their plates, floating in midair as tiny energy streams linked them. He adjusted the reactor controls to let the scrap feed each cube. With power, the lights on the bridge flickered in response to the surging energy, and the alien runes on the hull glowed bright white. Suri and Lark stood beside the weapons console, waiting for the cubes to align. "Once these pieces merge," Suri said softly, "we unlock the ship's full arsenal: rail cannons, plasma turrets, and energy shields." Jax nodded. "Then we show the galaxy the price of underestimating scrap and courage." Outside the ship, enemy patrols gathered at the edge of Andros orbit. They had sent all they had to retake the vault, unaware of what lay in the ship's hold. Viga watched the radar screens and reported, 50 enemy craft approaching fast, some heavy battleships. "They will engage in 2 minutes." Jax turned to his crew and said, "Hold steady." He placed his hand on the central control lever, whispered, "Guide us true," and threw it forward. A pulse of light shot through the cubes, and they slid together with a soft click. Energy arcs crackled as the final blueprint glowed, and the scrap shone like a star born anew on the weapons console. Lark slammed her fist down, and the bridge shook with the charge of all the weapons. "Fire the primary rail cannons," she shouted. Massive bolts of supercharged metal shot out of the ship's sides and tore through the nearest battleships. The explosions lit the darkness of space in pale blue flares. Enemy fighters swarmed in response, but the warship turned on its broadside turrets. Twin plasma beams lanced out and cut them in half. Suri watched through the viewport and said, "They never saw this coming. Their weapons could never match our blueprint's power." The bridge rattled as enemy missiles found their mark, but energy. Shields flared and absorbed the blasts. Mara monitored the core's heartbeat and called out, "Shields at 80%. Recharging with scrap energy, no drain on main power." A heavy destroyer aimed a particle cannon at the ship's bow, trying to break the shields. Harlan leaned over the railing and said, "Take it down." He activated the ship's new ion pulse, and a wave of energy washed over the destroyer's hull, short-circuiting its systems and sending it drifting into space. With the enemy fleet in chaos, Vega engaged the jump drive. "Stand by for a final." "Warning jump," she announced. "We will appear over their capital and make them listen." Jocks took a breath and nodded. "Do it." The hull trembled and the bridge lights dimmed as stars stretched into lines. The warship slipped through space and reappeared above the enemy world, its alien symbols glowing like constellations in the sky. On the planet below, control towers and communication arrays picked up the signal. Panic spread among the ruling council, and broadcasts cut in with the sight of the warship hovering above the capital. Its voice boomed across every channel, not in their language, but in the deep, rhythmic pulse of the scrap. Green hills and shining cities lay below as the warship held its position. Jox's voice came through the speakers, calm and clear. "We built this ship from your scrap and your fear. We are the promise of those you oppressed, the power of the fallen, and the hope of the weak. Lay down your arms, or face the justice of our design." Silence settled over the world. Radios and screens went dark, and armies froze in place. The ruling council convened in panic, knowing they held no real power against the warship of legends. Their only choice was mercy. Below, crowds gathered in the streets, watching the sky. They had heard stories of the scrap-built warship, but none believed it real until now. Mothers held children and looked up in wonder, while soldiers laid down their weapons. Above, the warship's engines purred, and the scrap glowed with a soft, peaceful light. Jox turned to his crew and said, "We have done it. We have changed history." Mara smiled and whispered, "This is the power of unity, hope, and scrap." Later, in the quiet command deck, the crew toasted with cups of warm tea. Lark raised hers and said, "To the last scrap and the first legend." They clinked cups, their faces tired but bright. Jox placed his hand on the console and looked at the glowing blueprint. "Our warship will guard the galaxy, protect the weak, and remind everyone that even the smallest scrap can build wonders." The scrap's light pulsed in agreement, and for a moment all was still. Then the warship ascended into the stars once more, its engines leaving trails of blue fire, and its legend spread across worlds. The rise of the warship was complete, and wherever hope was needed, its hum was heard as a promise. The galaxy would never forget the power born from scrap and courage.